I think we are.
All right, well, here we are. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for our weekly webinar. We are pleasantly grateful to partner with Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business for a presentation on Where is the Money? I'm going to turn it over to Christy Fontanilla, who is a chamber board member and part of our executive team and with FAS Bookkeeping and Tax Services. Christy?
Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Where is the Money? It is my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. These two ladies are fellow Mod faculty at the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, to which I'm very proud to be a part of. I'm excited to introduce them and hear what they have to share with us, to all the small business owners in our community. First, I would like to introduce Liz Carreno. Liz is the Director for Outreach and Marketing for Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. Liz has many relationships with industry organizations and chambers across the city, providing her the opportunity to work and meet with many business owners and leaders. Liz?
Good morning, Christy. Can you put that first slide up for me? I want to certainly thank you and Matt for this opportunity for us to be able to talk to our business owners. And, you know, many of our business owners are in the Katy Chamber area, you know, but our business owners are all across different counties and in the surrounding greater Houston market. So it's very much important for us to remain in contact and talk about the resources. Goldman Sachs has had, you know, such an impact in Texas. And, you know, one of the things aside from the 10,000 small businesses is not only is it here in Houston, but the demand was so high that we opened up a second site in Dallas. And we also have our Goldman Sachs National Program that if you're not in either of these two cities, they can apply and they participate at a national level. Goldman Sachs launched the 10,000 Women to help women launch their own businesses. They recently, with the $550 million in relief funds, which Rebecca's going to answer a couple of questions a little bit later, but 50 million of that was in Texas. And then our recent launch of the Goldman Sachs Black and Latinx Entrepreneur Cohorts, and those are for businesses that are at 1 million on, and it's an 8-week program. So we're really excited that we are part of an organization that has made this kind of investment into our community. And a couple of things about, you know, our program is that its focus is on the operation of the business and creating a growth strategy that addresses every aspect of their business, regardless of the product or the service. One of the biggest things is the support system that we've been able to provide, not only with our close to 800 Goldman Sachs alumni in over 40 industries, but our resource partners across the city. A couple of things that I really want to point out about our program is that regardless of where we are, what the climate is in the industry, is that everybody's in the same boat. But when you focus on the operation, you know, having the agility to move quickly and address what the challenges are, to adaptability to change, where can we make these changes so that we're able to not maybe thrive at the moment, but survive. And then the innovation, the ability to reinvent. And that's where our resources and our support systems come in. And to me, that's been a really big plus for our Goldman Sachs alumni. And I think for us, the bottom line is that you are not alone. You need to pick up that phone. You need to have that perspective because there's always somebody there to collaborate. One of the things that, you know, that I've got listed on here, it is access to capital. We have built relationships. Lift Fund has been our primary source for distributing the funds. However, these funds with many of their relationships, and we've brought these bankers in to meet our Goldman Sachs scholars, as well as many of our other events, because for them, it's the education of the kind of relationships you must have with your banker. And that's really been in the news for the last month, is that when they talk about who's getting the money, and bankers are working with the businesses that they have a relationship with. So we have made an extraordinary effort to bring in those financial institutions during our program so that they can talk one-on-one, you know. And I always, you know, my saying is that when you're in front of your bank and you're about to ask for money, you know, you should not be saying, I hope I get the money. You should already know whether or not you're going to get it. You should already be on a first name basis, you know, and have some sense of understanding of, you know, whether you're going to get it, how much you're going to get, and maybe the only thing to negotiate might be the terms at the end of the day. One of the things that we have changed because of because of this situation is our adaptability and our agility, is that we actually have a class that graduates this Friday, and they are completing their class online. So for us, we want them to continue their process because more than ever, it's important. We normally hold 3 cohorts a year. And if you could change the screen for me, Christy, I'd appreciate it. One of the things that we've done is that we have been accepting applications, and we closed it in February for a summer session. And that summer session, we have now canceled that, and we have moved it to the fall. And we have decided to expand the fall class. And our hope, we have a hope that we will be able to step back into the classroom and have those face-to-face. But if not, we are certainly prepared to hold these classes online. So we are accepting applications until June the 4th for our fall cohort 28 class. And minimum requirements, again, 2 years in business. You can use your 2019 IRS information, that your income tax that you sent in. I encourage you to go to apply, 10ksbapply.com. Visit us at our Houston Community College website. And by the end of the week, we will actually have our new site up because of the tremendous amount of resources that we have, which will also include the Katy Chamber. More than anything, everybody should be looking at their business directories to figure out who they can collaborate with. We are certainly getting calls asking us for resources, and we are answering. I know our executive director is online, and we're fielding the calls, not only from our alumni, but from the business owners that we have met and our partners. So anything that we can do to be a resource of information or get you an answer, we certainly will make that extraordinary effort. And my executive director online is Dr. Kim Burrows. And Rebecca, who you're about to hear from now, has been with us, and she's been on the front line actually putting together some of these packages. So we thought that she could answer up-to-date information on where those loan packages are and where the funds exist at this time. So Christy, I'm going to hand it back to you, and thank you for the opportunity to let me talk about the program and bring in Rebecca in to address this. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
You're welcome, Liz. And I've really met a lot of small business owners that really, it made a huge difference in how they're managing their business, and now they're really thriving in their business. So this is really a great program. Now I would like to introduce Rebecca Schultz. Rebecca has 2 decades of lending experience with a focus on commercial lending and business banking. Rebecca dedicates her time to assisting business owners with access to capital and business growth. She also owns several businesses and currently owns a consulting firm. Prior to owning this consulting firm, she was a commercial loan officer representing multiple lenders. Rebecca serves as a financial educator to the community, focused on building better credit for small business owners. As a certified credit counselor and financial analyst, she provides energetic and engaging seminars for individuals that are serious about securing their future and gaining access to capital. Rebecca?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tristan. Thank you, Liz and Matt, for inviting me. I love this conversation, and I've been following it closely for the last month. It has been just in one way fascinating to watch all the changes roll out so quickly, whereas in the small business community, we haven't seen access to capital on this level ever, literally ever. So last week, we got some pretty crippling news that funds had run out on the economic stimulus package previously approved. And business owners were left stranded, really just stranded, trying to figure out what to do next and what action they could put in just to save their businesses. So the news that is coming out this morning, yesterday, is that we should see, hopefully today, an additional approval on that stimulus package in the amount of $370 billion. All right, 310 billion of those will be put out into additional funds for those PPP loans, the Payment Protection Program through SBA. Now, a lot of people on this call are familiar with the different stimulus programs going through the SBA office, so I won't try to educate to that level. Although if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer those offline or after the presentation. But so 310 billion will be given out in the PPP funds, and 60 billion of those 310 are actually going to be designated for both rural and minority businesses. They've understood or seen what is being approved through the banks on the PPP level, and they're trying to amend or fix some of those unfavorable sides of lending. So we're going to see this roll out in a slightly different way, which is exciting. In addition to that, we're going to see about 60 billion in additional funding for the economic injury disaster loans, also known as the EIDL loans. So business owners that are maybe waiting to hear back from SBA directly on those disaster loans will hopefully start getting some news or feedback from SBA directly. So we know that money's coming, and the goal is that we'll see that money released as early as tomorrow, but most likely it'll be Thursday or Friday of this week. My goal on this presentation is really to let you know that it will be coming. That's what the signs say, as well as what you can do to prepare and answer some must-needed questions right now as you're getting ready for that money. Next slide. All right, so we learned a lot through the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks, 14 days is what we had on the PPP front prior to it being exhausted. We learned that banking relationships, just like Liz said, are critical to being able to get access to capital. To individuals that maybe had less personable relationships, no personal contact with that bank, so to speak, no phone numbers or contact details for anybody that would pick up the phone outside of just the main line, they're hurting. They're not able to get their questions answered. At the same time, we're seeing a lot of the community lenders really rise to the challenge. I'm extremely thankful, one, that we work with a lot of those banks that have been held at high praise. You've seen an article out on the Houston Business Journal praising those individuals. You can open up your LinkedIn, and business owners are so moved by the quality of support that they've gotten and the level of attention that they're going out and just voluntarily doing random videos thanking their bankers for all their hard work and the dedication. So if you are in a banking relationship where you did not get good support or care and you are still left trying to figure out where do you go or what to do, this might be a really good lesson learned that you need to find a new banker that will be able to pick up that phone and support you and walk you through that process in a more cohesive way. And so the banks that really earned the designation through the community were banks like Allegiance Bank, Wallace State Bank, Frost Bank, and Wood Forest Bank. Those were the top ones. They got out amazing amounts of these PPP funds to small businesses, and they really worked themselves around the clock to answer calls and and they're still working, trying to prepare those loan packages for individuals that just barely missed that cutoff, but they're still hoping to support them when the new stimulus funds roll out. Right. We also learned that you have to act fast. All the funds that are coming out from the federal government are first come, first serve. So individuals that maybe were delayed in other ways. And I understand when your business is crumbling, it's really hard to think about paperwork or drive yourself into a situation where you're behind the scenes. You feel very called to being on the front lines. But at the same time, if you're not watching your numbers, if you're not having these discussions on the access to capital front, what we see is that you get left out and you're behind the scene. All right. The other side of it is a lot of business owners maybe were delayed for whatever reason in getting their financials updated. They didn't have accurate numbers to support the loan request. Therefore, they were delayed. They weren't able to access capital quickly. And so we learned that we have to stay on top of those numbers. And if you haven't already started to figure out your 2019 end of year taxes, this is the time to do it, especially if you plan on going after any of these PPP funds, because especially for the sole proprietors or small businesses, they're going to be required to have those 2019 tax returns at least done or worked up, not necessarily submitted to the IRS yet, but at least completed in order to apply or take advantage of this fund. Also too, cash flow projections is essential. And last week I was in some conversations with over 150 different business owners across the nation. And in general, I think the sentiment was they didn't want to look at what the future had to hold because they just were so uncertain about it. And it was really scary and uncomfortable. And they didn't even want to look at their bank accounts because it was really scary and uncomfortable. And what they learned is through looking at those numbers and projecting forward, they were able to really get their heads around what type of activities they needed to do in order to survive just at least the next few weeks. Next slide. So here we go. So from the banking relationship viewpoint, we really need to find a personal relationship, somebody that we can open up into our fold, into like a board situation and ask for advice. You should have a banking partner that's able to give you a sounding board of information and give you tips to support you and pick up that phone whenever you need an answer. Also too, communication, right? If a lot of business owners had communication on this front as to what might not be right with their package or what they needed to include with that package, they probably would have been able to act faster. So you need that type of banking relationship that has a strong communication foundation. Response time, right? You need to know what's happening with your package and your money as soon as possible. You have to make decisions as a leader about this, and it's just impossible to try to lead an organization and navigate these minefields that are in front of us without that type of communication. Bankers are instructors, educators, believe it or not, whether they own that title or they don't, they need to, or you need to find a banker that can give you direction or guidance, especially when it comes down to access to capital. All right, next slide. All right, so being proactive, act fast. You got to know your numbers, know the cash that's coming in and the cash that's going out of your business, right? That also leads to those cash flow projections. But you can't ask for money or get the right amount of money without knowing what you need. So really the leadership on that front comes from you as the business owner. You got to be extremely fast in responding to change when this disaster took over. Right? That was manning your team, figuring out what you had to do or what they had to do in order to stay safe and keep operations going. You had to figure out your communication channels, right? Same way with your money. It's all tied together. And you need to find others that are either in your industry or in similar industries that are going through the same thing, that have new insight, that can help you really understand how to be the best at your game, especially on that capital front. So Liz had mentioned the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program, and that is probably one of the best mentorship programs that I have personally seen come out of the Houston market, or actually national market for that front. But we're looking for business owners that are serious about everything that I've talked about, finding good relationships, figuring out your cash flow projections, understanding how to be responsive, growth, and putting your head around that. Find a mentorship program that can support you in that manner. And I promise you, you'll be in much better condition than a lot of the other peers around you. Next. All right, so this is a tough one. There's so much being thrown at business owners right now, but we have to stay on top of our numbers as things change. We're about to see a stay-at-home release, right? Getting back to work that's supposed to start on this coming Friday. We should be looking at the news, figuring out what's the change and what that change looks like for our financial position. So you got to make sure that you've got updated financials to support that information, especially those loan applications. So if you're trying to figure out how to get access to capital right now, you've got to start with knowing where you are financially and start getting the applications already pulled together if you haven't yet. I know there's a lot of business owners that were halfway done and they just kind of stopped when they got the news that we were put on pause for funding. Just those lenders are still taking applications in most situations, and you can still get feedback, make sure that all your support documentation is there to answer questions, and more importantly, that you're borrowing the right amount of money. There is some danger with these PE funds. I don't know if anybody's really talked about that into depth on the numbers, but just based on the average numbers they're expecting for the forgiveness component of that loan, you have to be really careful that you don't borrow too much money and therefore you're not able to use appropriately to qualify for the forgiveness component. Again, having those updated financials as well as a good conversation with your banker is important. All right, so you've got to have those numbers and those documentations in order for you to take advantage of that forgiveness program, right? We're dealing with government here, and it's not just pretty strong considerations if you take those funds. You need to make sure that you're prepared to document and show that support for that forgiveness component. Forgiveness for these loans is going to be huge. It's going to make the difference of the business being able to do well in 2021 or beyond. So make sure as this money's rolling out, as you're receiving it, if you're one of those few lucky business owners that have been able to get access to that capital, make sure that you have your documentation in place to make the forgiveness side of this much smoother in the end. All right, so you need strong numbers to have really good insight and be able to navigate properly. So keep up with this financial information. That's your conversation or dialogue. It has to do with money to lend. If you didn't get enough with either the PP fund or the loan, you're going to need a forecast or projection, good quality numbers to help convince them to get the support, right? Help you know to do it all goes together. Next slide. Okay, so cash flow projections, how do you do it, right? It's tough, I know. I'm trying to figure out what's going to happen when the future is so uncertain. We all get it. I was actually talking with an optometrist. She told me how they could do some emergency services, but for the most part, the funds had dried up, and she was just so frustrated and scared about the future. But she made herself sit down for about 2 hours and look at her numbers. And she said at the end of that, coming up with even a simple cash flow projection or plan really alleviated fears or concerns, and she feels so much better now, right? I feel like it's a band-aid. We've got to rip it off in order to really see what's underneath, but when we are able to address the problem, heal it, right? So you need financial projections in order to sound decisions. You're the leader of your organization, even if that's a team of one, if it's you. If you don't have a plan of how you're going to survive this or what kind of cash flow or changes you need in the business in order to survive, you're going to, right? We understand when economic disasters happen, there's a good likelihood that less than 70% of those businesses are going to survive the disaster. So that's the front we're on. Those that survive are going to be the ones that put the energy in and come up with a sound plan. And you can't come up with a sound plan if you can't communicate the health of the business, right? So you've invested in your business hugely, I'm sure, right? Everybody invested either their own money, their time, energy, life, right? You have to protect that. And that comes with knowing those numbers and having a sound plan. Remember, if you can just set aside a few hours to get a few things down for this conversation, I promise you, you'll sleep better at night. Next slide. All right, so if you still need money, you need to go to your bankers. Right? This is the conversation, this is the relationship that support you. I encourage you to, if you don't have a good banking relationship, ask those friends, go on to LinkedIn, look for those videos where people have talked about hard them, and give somebody a call, right? Bankers are still working. They're working more than their average day, right? So find a new relationship that's going to serve you. Have those numbers set aside to support that communication. Next. All right, so pull together the financials, especially your 2019 tax information. That's going to be huge, right? Get a number for a good banker, right? Have good numbers that you can lead from. That's all about the numbers, numbers, right? Next. All right, and so we know that the money's coming. So where's the money? The money is honestly all around us, really. What you can do right now is prepare to receive it and make sure that you're receiving the right amount and that you're going to be in the right relationship to be able to monitor that, right? You need your documentation and to be able to continue growing through this disaster. So we know that the government money that's coming is the lowest rates that we've seen in a really long time. This is the time to find the money, right? Long term. So if you have to borrow money, you're going to be able to do so and it's going to be affordable. And you have the opportunity, especially for the PPP funds, to see that forgiven. So you don't have to worry about carrying that debt on into the future. And on top of that, the PPP forgiveness component of those loans is non-taxable. So this money is not going to harm you if you're able to and to move forward. All right, next. All right, so in summary, money is available for businesses. If you don't have it in your pocket right now, you should be doing what you can in order to secure it. And that's through those relationships and making sure that you have a good heartbeat on what you need, right? The full amount that you need. You can go to your bank. They were the #1 leaders in supporting small businesses. I already named a few of those if you're looking for a good bank. All right, CDFIs, Liz had mentioned Lift Fund. They are a community development financial institution here in the Houston area. They did partner with Goldman Sachs out of New York, and she was exactly spot on. $50 million is what they dedicated to support businesses in Texas. So I know that the Lift Fund team has already appropriated that they received $5 million for the Houston area. So that money has already been put out to small business owners. In fact, they did it in less than a week. It was phenomenal. But more money is coming from the federal government. We should hopefully see it by tomorrow at the earliest, but most likely before Friday of this week. Industry associations, this is what's so amazing. All around us, people are seeing the need, and those individuals that are in position to support other businesses are doing so, right? And you would find out about those unique situations through your industry trade associations. So if you haven't looked up your trade association yet, if you haven't been a part of that conversation, reach out to them. It's phenomenal. The crowdfunding sources are out there, as well as grants that are available. So really, if you want to answer the question, where's the money? Here's that. Money is entering to the economy, right? You have to do your part in order to secure it. and to support your business. And then your team at Katy Chamber, the Goldman Sachs team, the resources through the Small Business Development Center, right? They're all there to support you. All right, and I hope this information was helpful. And again, my name is Rebecca Schultz with Synerlock. I'm the executive loan consultant. I'm more than happy to take this offline and answer any additional questions. You can find me at www.synerlock, that's SYNER.
Well, thank you, Rebecca.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
So
Rebecca.
I have a few
ahead.
questions.
Okay.
We've had a few people reach out either via email or through chat. If anybody has any questions regarding any of the information, or if you have a question that went unanswered, please use the chat function on the webinar to post, and we'll get that answered as soon as we can. But here's a question I received. I have two, so this is the first one. I applied with Bank of America in early April for PPP. 3 days later, they received a call or an email, requesting certain documents, and they had everything that was ready and it was delivered successfully. As of today, they have not heard back. They've emailed the bank a number of times. They've been in good standing for almost 10 years. What do they do now? Do they wait? Do they apply with a different lender? What would you suggest?
Yeah, so I know that on those PPP funds, they are trying to keep individuals from applying at multiple lenders at the same time, right? So the reason why is those banks were basically trying to hold on to the numbers for all applications and protect that through accounts going to the federal government, trying to stave off new applications if they were unable to support them. So by going to multiple lenders, they would be those numbers, skewing those figures, and limiting support for others who are unable to get support. So it is important that they try to figure out where they are with their current lender, but at the same time, start talking to another lender. Go ahead and have the conversation, be upfront that you have an application out with the other lender, and just figure out what their process is. It does not hurt to try to get everything in and get a kind of tentative pre-approval, and then they can drop the application at the other lender. That's what I would do. You can't let your future be held up by lack of communication, right? That would be irresponsible as a business owner. But at the same time, you have to respect the processes in play, knowing that if they are in fact withholding or holding on to your application number and reporting that to the government, you are essentially being secured as far as your access to capital. But you've got to figure out essentially where you stand. But I would have to say that banking relationship for 10 years is not proving itself helpful. So I think you need to try to find another banking relationship, but just be mindful of the back end process.
Another question that we received, and I believe you may have touched on it earlier today, are there any advantages of going to a small regional or local bank versus one of the major banks due to relationships and how quickly things can get through?
Yeah, so we saw that, right? Like that was phenomenal. Who was the top lender? Allegiance Bank. I got personally through a friend of mine who had applied later in the game, received amazing communication feedback from multiple levels on her application. She was able to get the money at the last minute. She was a new relationship to them. She didn't have an account with them prior, but they bent over backwards in order to support her. So Allegiance did over 3,000 PPP loans in the matter of like 2 weeks, which is just phenomenal, right? And the communication was on point the whole time. So business owners were extremely happy with that. So the large banks, I can't say that they had horrible communication, and a lot of the dialogue I've had with my small business friends, but it was definitely lacking. It was not anywhere near what we saw come from the small community lenders, right? Yeah. So again, the community lenders was Allegiance, Wallace Bank did a fantastic job with their team. Frost Bank did a fantastic job, as well as Wood Forest They were at the top of the 10 banks performance with total PPP loans, and they had the most, I guess, fan response for their service.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another thing that some people may forget to do, which is an easy call or request, is utilize your local chamber or business association that you're a part of. Utilize the relationships that they have with the bankers and stuff like that to maybe help get your questions answered. If you don't have a direct contact, we in this industry have very straightforward contacts with a number of different bankers, whether they're members or not, just based off the relationships within that community itself. So feel free to reach out to your local chamber or business association and try and guide you to get a response, at least, if you haven't gotten that yet. And so we'll share all of our contact information. If you want, you can go to the Katy Chamber or go to the local chamber's website that your business is a part of. But we've got a few more that came through chat. Do we have any contact information for the Industry Trade Association?
Yeah, okay. So you can always, I mean, that's like public information as far as industry trade. But one of my favorite like go-to places, it's called NACM. That's the National Association of Credit Management. Okay, so what they do for all industries is they keep track of who gets paid and who doesn't pay. They're the largest provider of trade credit. So if you want to find out what's happening in the cash flow side of any industry, you would be able to find out through NACM, as well as I feel like they're going to be hugely important after this whole disaster situation blows over, is because businesses are going to be weak. Right? They're hopefully going to get access to capital, but things are going to come back potentially slower for some industries. If you are in a position where you're doing business-to-business services and you need to figure out whether or not you should take on new contracts, or if you're having problems collecting money for your businesses, NACM can support you on that front. They are the #1 collector of small business funding. So if you need your accounts receivable collected, they can support that. And it's a nonprofit organization. They're all about communication.
And Rebecca, if I could also add to that, you know, in the city of Houston, there are so many industry organizations, whether it's Houston Contractors, Texas Restaurant Association, Greater Houston Manufacturing Association. And many of these organizations have relationships and resources that are specifically addressing their industry. So, you know, now's the time. I said the 3 things. Your company, you must be agile, you must be able to adapt, and you must be innovative. So if you're just saying, okay, where do I start? You know, you need to get online. So how hungry are you? Let's look for those resources to get you. If not, reach out to Katie or one of us, and we're more than happy to help you get started.
All right. We have another question that's stating that they believe they received the EIDL payment, a $2,000 deposit. Is that the grant that doesn't need to be paid back? Is that the advance? Go, I guess, a little bit more further into detail about EIDL, as I think we are all aware of PPP and those, but I think EIDL has got a little bit more, not necessarily regulations, but more direct information that's different than PPP.
Yeah, you're right. So yeah, that definitely sounds like it was what they call the EIDL advance. It is the EIDL grant. So the way that rolls out from SBA is when you applied for the economic injury disaster loan, you must have selected the little checkbox to be included in the advance component. And that advance through the CARES Act is completely, what would you say, free. Like, you don't have to pay that back. And they fund that within 3 days of the pre-qualification. So if you've got that dollar amount and it roughly matches the number of employees you have for your organization, you got the grant. So congratulations, you're one of the few luckies that were able to get in there and claim it. So next, within the next few days, typically 48 hours, you should be getting an email from SBA that would be notifying you of your pre-qualification for the EIDL loan should you have qualified for the actual EIDL loan. You can make that decision if you want to move forward on that. There's forms they're going to send you, the documents to sign. And once you sign those documents, you should receive up to $25,000, assuming that that's what you qualified for from the EIDL loan, minus your $2,000, so potentially $23,000, right? And you would receive that in your bank within 5 business days. So you're in a really fantastic position. You just have to wait for additional communication from SBA, which hopefully that will be coming this week since you already got your grant. So congratulations.
Mhm.
We have another comment that was made saying that they applied within 24 hours of Texas declaring as a disaster state. And they reached out to their lender while they were on this webinar, and they were told that don't call us, we will call you. Regarding, I believe it's regarding the PPP. And so are lenders fielding calls? Are they trying to help? Are they just being bombarded, overwhelmed? Is it just a wait and see game? I feel like a lot of people, a lot of businesses are waiting and they're wanting answers, and they may not be getting them directly.
Yeah, so, I'm really sorry about that. That's awful to get that kind of communication. And honestly, I don't feel like that's warranted. Business owners need answers, they need support. That's my own personal opinion. So they are bombarded, they are trying to catch up. It's been a lot of work thrown at them. I mean, years worth of work thrown at them in a very short period of time within a few weeks. But still, you need to know where you fall in line and whether or not your documentation will be considered as soon as the funding comes up, right? So if you're getting that type of response, it doesn't make me feel good. I'm sure it doesn't make you feel good either. So I would recommend talking to another lender. You still have the opportunity to move your application, right? Find somebody who's willing to answer those questions, at least give you a review to make sure your information's in order and you do in fact qualify for that type of funding, and that would be fantastic. So again, I think you can use Katie Chamber in order to try to get some support on maybe a new banking relationship to approach. You've got your documentation together. Go ahead and see if you can find somebody to give it a pre-review and then try to get that approved. All right, and just make sure you're communicating with the other lender as well. You don't want to leave an application and have that whole doubling of funds take place, right? That's not fair to anybody. So make sure you're good to go.
With the proposed addition to the stimulus package, the additional $370 billion that should likely be added sometime this week, do you know if the business spectrum grew under that umbrella? Because from a chamber perspective, 501c6 organizations and certain nonprofits were not under that original umbrella. Do you know if they've widened that for this?
Yeah. Yeah, good question, Matt. You're on it. So yeah, they did. They made 2 additional inclusions in the eligibility requirements as of last week and the very end of the week before. So they are allowing for small faith-based organizations and houses of worship to be able to apply for both the SBA EIDL loan, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, as well as the PPP loan. They've also allowed for small ag cooperatives, right? So that would be ranchers, farmers, anybody with 500 or fewer employees, right? And then I think 50 million or less in gross net worth, right? So those individuals are now able to be supported, again, through both those loan programs. So if you have questions, if you fit one of those designations, SBA.gov has a facts and answers section, especially for the faith-based organizations. I think that's one of the more popular nonprofit designations. Go in there, do the facts and answers. You should be able to find whether or not you qualify and then apply.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions from our attendees? If you guys would like, if our panelists would like to take a few moments for any closing comments, by that time, if we don't have any further questions, we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar.
if I may just say something here, just my biggest takeaway with what Rebecca had mentioned here is like two things. The first one is really the community banks really step up, right, in terms of helping small business owners in the area. And that's really very encouraging, especially hearing some of the comments that the other big banks were not really very responsive in terms of providing some sort of feedback to their clients. So at least it's good to have that, the community bank really helping small business owners. And then the other thing really that struck me is, you know, with this, things like this is like any other loan. You need to be ready with your financials. You can't just apply for a loan without having a good financial information. And I think part of the success of those that were able to get access to that PPP is because they are ready. They submitted it right away and they were able to get access to that loan before the funds ran out. So I think those are my two key takeaways here. And so for you, Liz and Rebecca, what do you think are like the main key takeaway that our attendees should remember? Because I know there's a lot of information here, but if there's one thing that you would like them to take away from this webinar, what would that be?
You know, I think, you know, I've been with the program for 10 years now, and the application process, we started out, I remember when we came to Houston, and we celebrate 10 years now, so we've been here a while. But the application process from paper, now it's all online, is when we ask for the financials, the number of businesses that have to search for their financials for their business. And these businesses have been in existence for maybe 5-10 years or more. So that gives us a little bit of a heads up of where they are in their finances. So that speaks to sometimes their operation and structure. The second thing is when they actually are scholars in the class and we bring in the financial institution, so they have an opportunity to talk to them more than once and understanding the lending process. That's probably the number one change that our scholars make is financial institutions. Just because you've had a checking account there for 10 years doesn't mean you're going to get the loan if you don't know any of the officers or have a relationship. So I think the biggest lesson is this is your business, this is your livelihood. So you've got to have your financials ready to go. And if somebody else got there before you did, it's because they had their financials ready. So I cannot, you know, encourage you enough. And if you need help in getting those financials between SCORE and SBA, the templates are there for you to be able to put these things together. The resources, you know, you're a CPA, Rebecca, the resources are there, but your chambers are providing those services too, in terms of access. So this is the time to put this together. And I said, you have to be agile, you have to adapt, and you have to be innovative. And once again, you can't sit back if you're going to survive. You've got to really step in there. And just one more plug for Goldman Sachs. We're accepting applications until June the 4th for fall, and it'll be a fairly large class. So we're asking if you're interested, please apply at 10ksbapply.com. Thank you.
Yeah, I mirror what Liz says. That's everything, really, 100%.
Okay, well, with that, I think we've concluded our webinar. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for our attendees joining in today. If you came on late or you had to step away early, we did go ahead and record the webinar, and we will post it on our social media platforms as well as our YouTube channel. So if there's anything else, please feel free to reach out to us directly. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kirsty. Bye, Liz. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.